Hi everyone. In today's video I'm going to talk a little bit, or maybe a lot of it, about my attempts, my success, and my ultimate failure at creating a little digital FPV microcrawler, which you're looking at here. Because I thought of all the kinds of ground-based vehicles, crawling is probably the best match for FPV because of its, mostly because of its low speed, as opposed to a really fast buggy or truck or something, which I think is just, it's too fast and too bumpy to, I think, enjoy with FPV, but I thought maybe crawling would be a good match for it. So I started looking around for some microcrawlers and ended up here with the Axial SCX24. It's been around for quite a few months, but it's a nice price. It's like 120 bucks, and even without FPV, it's a really nice little kit, very fun to play around with. And I thought it was just big enough to carry the digital system, and I had an idea about how to wire it up, which I'll talk about in a second. But first thing is I'll show you how I installed it, which is actually quite simple and straightforward. So in the kit here, this is the original battery tray, which runs vertically, as you can see. And I just put the Vista on the front half of that with some VHB double-sided tape, and just used a longer Velcro strap and am running the battery sideways. This is not the stock battery, which is here, but you can run the stock battery in the same way, but I removed the connector from that, which I'll talk about in a second. So anyway, just put the Vista on the front there and then run the battery sideways with a longer strap. And the way I wired this up is it's quite simple, because all you need to do is give power to the Vista, because there's no OSD or anything like that to worry about. So it's just, here's the power coming, or power going to the Vista, which I just have connected to this XT30, which is then split going into the receiver and the ESC. So when you plug in the battery, power goes to the Vista and to the ESC as normal. So it's all powered just from the single battery. And then the next question becomes, how do you then mount the camera? And I came up with a couple of different solutions for that. First one is just using the standard body. You do have to modify it a little bit. You have to cut out the part where the driver sits. You need to remove all of that. And I removed the front fenders here. You don't have to do that. I just did that for saving some weight, and I thought maybe you could see the wheels from the camera, but you couldn't actually do that. So with this method, the camera just goes up through the opening that you have to cut. You can put a little piece of foam tape or something underneath the camera to provide some extra support, but for now I'm just going to strap the camera on so you can see how this works. So just like that, see there are a couple of points here on the little roll cage where you can run a strap through there. And this is the simplest installation method. You just Velcro it to the little roll cage there, and you got a nice little setup and has a good view. Now it's kind of bad for the center of gravity, because this model is already a little bit top heavy, and putting this camera up there doesn't really help, but it is the best view. You can do the same exact idea, but just hang the camera down there for a little bit lower center of gravity, but it's just harder to see where you're going. So this was the first method that I found to mount the camera, and it was really fun to drive around like this, but you know, it basically anytime you get a little bit sideways, it wants to tip over. So that's kind of the problem with this method. So I thought maybe I could try to save some weight, design just something that holds the camera without the body, because the body weighs about 30 grams, about the same as the Vista. So if you remove the body, then you're canceling out the weight of the Vista. So I had another idea of maybe 3D printing something, which I'll show you next. So this was my idea for a little minimal 3D printed camera mount. So it just uses the existing mounting points down there, the existing screws, and the front body post, and just folds around and holds the camera up there like that. And I had actually had quite a lot of fun designing this. These are some early prototypes you can see. You just print it flat, and then it folds around like that. And this is the one I used the most in capturing the footage and testing this little thing out. And like I said, happy with this part of it. And even though it is very good, anytime you get it a little bit sideways, it'll topple over. So anytime you try to do any kind of interesting crawling at all, it's going to topple over, which means you have to go pick it up, take off your goggles, flip it back over, and try again. But the main issue, the biggest problem, is just that the Vista will overheat very, very easily. Even at running it at 25 milliwatts, at first I had it at 500, and it overheated like immediately. Put it down to 200, still overheated right away. And even down at 25 milliwatts, driving around outside today, which it was not really a warm day, it was in the 60s, and it would overheat after about 10 minutes. The Vista would start giving you heat warnings and want to shut itself down. So I think in this kind of application, if you're going to run it on a crawler, you're going to need to run a fan or some kind of cooling system on the Vista itself, because it's designed to have like airflow of a quad, like a lot of air moving over it all the time to keep it cool, and without that it just tends to overheat even at the lowest power setting. So I think that's why in the beginning I said ultimately I think this idea doesn't work because you're going to need to run a fan on the Vista, and to run a fan it's getting big, and it's getting bigger. I think you're going to have to run it on at least maybe like a 1/16 or probably a 1/10 scale. And also with a bigger machine, it's going to be less likely to be tumbling over all the time. I mean, it's still going to go over. And so to me it wasn't a great experience, but I did really enjoy the crawling aspect. So what I think I'm going to do is, in place of the Vista, I'm just going to install a little baby turtle, just with no VTX, just power it the same way I'm powering this, and probably use the original body, and just put the baby turtle you know, inside or on the outside, maybe in interesting places, maybe looking down into the suspension, into the wheel, and just drive it line of sight, like I think crawler is most fun to do, but then use this just as like an onboard. And I think I might do that next, so, and then maybe include some footage of that, and then that'll be this video.